I'm calling in specifically because I made a promise to a friend of mine who is Catholic, and we have these wonderful discussions about her belief and how I think. I just suggested she doesn't think, but anyway, she suggested a book for us to read together called The Light of Christ, and it's essentially an apologetics book. And I just finished reading the introduction, and part of it was a wonderful sentence, just as an example of where this thing can go. Mm-hmm. It says, here we naturally in opening our hearts to search for God, we set out in hope and trust, acknowledging all the while the serious possibility of failure. Here we naturally try to avoid the two extremes of excessive skepticism and facile credulity. Excessive skepticism can lead to despair, which is a hidden form of self-aggrandizement. Facile credulity can lead to ideology, which is a not so hidden form of idolatry. Just in the introduction alone, there seems to be a lot of these sort of statements that claim to be, to some degree, self-evident. And I'm attempting to understand how I can have a discussion on this book as time goes on. I'm sure it's just going to become even more assumptive. Already in chapter 1, I've read it say, it's not that we can prove through any sort of logic or reasoning or mathematics that God is. It's simply that he is.
Yeah.
And that's first page. So I am trying to find a way to be able to discuss this book where I'm not sitting down in front of her and saying, how could you think this is good?
I like that introduction because it's like, okay, you should be skeptical enough to know that all the other religious beliefs and stuff are not true, but you should still believe enough to know that Catholicism is where it's at, like that's kind of the sentiment that's given there. It's so funny you bring this up, Andrew, because this week I'm trying to get somebody to read A Better 10 Commandments by, I believe the author is James Miller. I got to meet him once at a convention. He was really cool. It's a book about secular humanism, and just like how can we as secular humanists, people who lack a belief in God, have ethics? And it's kind of this brief kind of explanation. I'm trying to convince this other person to read it because and they're worried about the the polemics against Christianity and stuff because they're a Christian. But I'm trying to show them hey, this is pretty mild compared to like Hitchens or Dawkins, it's not as, it's a bit more tame. So I guess my strategy with that is, it's all about framing when it comes to this kind of stuff. And I think the most honest thing you can do is give just your genuine response to what you think about what's just read to them. Because sometimes it may be shocking to them that you have such what they would perceive as extreme skepticism towards the author. But I mean, I'm assuming, Andrew, you've been around the block. You've seen a lot of this stuff before, and maybe just a little bit of honesty, especially someone who cares enough to show you, a book or doing something together, is going to get their minds thinking about it. Remember, when you have these conversations, I think people really respect that you're being genuine with how you feel about things, and it's easy for us because we know other atheists, right? We know how we can be sometimes with these kinds of conversations. We can be a bit dismissive and we can be a bit hard on these kinds of things. But this is a moment that you're creating with someone that's very personal. And so I think that gives you the avenue or the opportunity to be as personal as you can with your response to this stuff. And maybe point out other examples of how other people have tried to use similar tricks in their writing to kind of convince them that, this what they're writing here is true. What do you think about this, Matthew?
Well, I also used to be in that position. Like I said, I used to be a believing Christian. And so it can be a little difficult considering I can be quite vehement. But at the same time, I'm also trying if I'm in a personal conversation with people, I'm also trying not to belittle their beliefs while I'm also trying to dissuade them to them. Mm-hmm. I'm not trying to be an asshole to their face. I don't even try to be an asshole. I'm just trying to put out what I believe or what my opinions are. I like to try to have opinions. Opinions can be changed. Beliefs people can kill over. And so I'll be like, look, hey, I understand where you're coming from this. I once thought the way you did. Let's discuss this and try to find some commonalities where you can maybe get some ideas of where I'm at or where I came from.
Yeah. Last time I tried the book thing, Andrew, it was about a year ago with a pastor's son, right? And we were actually going through straight up the Bible together. We were going through parts of the Pentateuch. And so, like, we were emailing back and forth. And so, like, every time I responded, I was like, okay, so this is what the biblical scholarship says about this, this, and this. Because this is someone who literally believed, like, oh, Moses wrote these books, and this is all historical stuff. And, like, you know, you could definitely tell there was like kind of a contrast there. I think at the end of the day, why my conversations might have failed in that regard was because I sensed a lot of judgment from them, because when they asked me questions, it was always personal questions about like, okay, so how did you get to the way that you are now? Like what emotional thing happened in your life to where you're so skeptical about these things? And why can't you just believe what you put in front of you? And like, I think when that inevitably happens to you, because generally it does, you just have to be as cool and as calm and as rational as you can be in these conversations and realize that this is just what they've been taught to ask. This is the pressures that they've been put on, and they're probably working on some stuff themselves. You'd be surprised that people who believe the most are actually struggling the most in their minds. I think what you got here is a great opportunity to maybe convince somebody of something that may not be true. So, yeah. Any thoughts on this, Andrew?
Yeah, it sounds. So I've already practiced a little bit with her and already moved past, because I've known her since high school. So we've gone past the screaming at each other until we hate each other and hate ourselves.
Great, fantastic.
We got past that.
There's some married couples that can't get past that. So good that you do this with your friends.
But it is an interesting discussion that we had, because where you and myself and Michael can sit down and probably have at least some sort of reasoning conversation. Like we might say a statement and completely disagree, and 20 minutes later realize, oh yeah, we all agreed on that. Yeah, we just didn't know the reasoning behind it yet. But especially this book in particular, and I'm sure she'll come with this as well, is that if you are to be, and it's already technically said this, if you are to attempt to reason to God, if you attempt to use the rules of logic, you will fail. So how do you come across, how do you deal with that type of problem?
So that's a bit different, right? We're talking about some precept stuff here. Right?
Yeah.
Like, no matter what you can do as a human being, your human logic fails you, puny mortal, because God is the one who's in control and created logic, the very thing you use to try to, persuade others that he doesn't exist. So yeah, it's a whole thing, obviously. It's really hard to get around that. Precepts are notorious for being, very adamant about their beliefs. I don't know if this person you're talking to is as adamant, but I will say I would, in this case, approach the historical background to Christianity and maybe show a timeline of history because Christianity is the result of a long process of beliefs going back to Judaism and even before that, where we can show archaeological evidence of, look, there's a timeline of how people got to the beliefs and the current constructs of God that we do today. This idea of God being the creator of logic and God being the creator of this, these are not, these are more recent ideas than people realize. And I think if you're able to show a timeline of that, kind of some background information, that might get their heads spinning in the right direction a bit more, because otherwise, if you're trying to, basically they're trying to create a battleground where they're going to win every single time, no matter what you do with it. And I'm kind of showing like, hey, maybe there's a way kind of around this path that we can go to show what makes sense to them. Because I think even if you're a religious person, I hope that you're interested in the history of your beliefs and how they came to be, and show that there's an individual timeline that we can point to some of these things. It didn't all just happen at, in the beginning, right? Like we have evidence of other things happening in the past and an evolution of these kinds of things. So, would you agree to that, Matthew?
I would, but I'm also the kind of person where somebody might be a precept and they come at me and I might quote back Hitchens. What can be asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. It can be a little hard to argue with precepts. Also, I've tend to found that people who I like to call religionists haven't studied the basis of their religions as much as they think they have. And so one of the reasons why I'm an atheist today is because I have studied the basis of these religions and how they have changed over time. And it tends to be that atheists tend to know a lot about biology, history of religions, and all kinds of stuff. And many Christians or other religionists barely know their own holy book. And so it can be a conversation you just want to beat your head against a wall against.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because when it stops, it feels so good.
Yeah. What are your thoughts, Andrew?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I was thinking about just trying to not so much warm out, but just kind of leave it alone if that's the argument where the argument tends to go. But I've become, as time went on, I think I was always sort of reasoning against. I shouldn't say against. I was always reasoning, period. But I had to just constantly fight with people who were just like, well, why not say God is the bottom, or why is he not the ultimate? Because you're telling me that through the priest's mouth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why not say Zeus is the ultimate? I think people don't realize that what they think is this ultimate is actually a construct, and it's a very human construct, especially if we're talking about the Christian God. It has very specific values to it, and you can't say that the universe is God if we're talking about the Christian God. I think that's something that a lot of Christians try to do. They try to say, oh, he's this big outside thing, but it's like, no, historically that has never been the case. If you ever read what these texts are talking about, that's not their view of God at all. The person who, several authors probably, who wrote Genesis and the people who wrote the New Testament and the different books of that, they all had different views of God. And you can very easily point out some differences in these views. But when it comes to Catholics, right, they may not know the Holy Book as well as us Protestants did. So
No,
that's a jab there. I'm just kidding. But
oh no, we're just expected to go to church and dress nice.
There you go. Yeah. Well, it's I all my extended family's Catholic, and they crack me up because modern Catholics I think are different from the Protestants in the sense that they're more politically their political motivations are different. The ones that I talk to are all about the abortion stuff, and they're all their headspace is so different from the Protestant Christians. It cracks me up, I guess.
I still have friends who are very conservative Christian from my time in the military, and also from when I was a conservative Christian, and we just don't talk about religion stuff. You just get to a point when you're just like, look, we're not going to agree on religion stuff. You can't. Yeah. And so you're like, look, let's just leave this subject alone and talk about whatever else that we have in common, and there just comes to a point when you just got to do that. I think if you value that friendship. But I have lost friendships. I've lost family members when I became an atheist. I've lost people that I've known from the church. I've lost people I've served in combat zones with. And so sometimes you just got to let them go. But there are other ones that I'm still friends with to this day.
Andrew, the best thing first of all, let me ask a question. This was her suggestion to read this book, right? Has she read this book?
She has not yet. She knows the author. He was I don't know what he was before, but he turned Catholic, became a priest.
Okay.
So she knows of him. She's heard him before, but the first time we both read this book.
Got it. I think if this is going to be a dialogue of, beliefs versus not beliefs, opinions versus opinions, I mean, maybe one of the best things to be is look, okay, write down what you think are the best arguments for God, or questions you might have for an atheist, right? And then that way you have something written in writing and you can have dialogue with, because especially when it comes to kinds of book discussions and stuff, I mean, you can go through all kinds of rabbit holes. I say try to be as organized as you can when you have these discussions, and have fun with it too. But the logic train when it comes to down to the pre-sub stuff, my suggestion is don't even go there. I mean, you can a great example of a conversation about this was when Matt Dillahunty talked with Saitan Bruggencate. And if you ever watch what Matt really did, I mean, Matt just kind of said his piece about the issue and didn't really have to say much else. He had his pre-written stuff, and because there's only so much you can say with these kinds of things. So that's why I'm saying okay, I think outside details are what's really missing here, because you gotta understand this argument is not something that has been historically used, one, and also it involves a lot more human ideas than what is purported as, because the idea is this is the ultimate, this is outside of people, but really it's got more to do with people than most people think. So, Well, cool, Andrew. I hope that answered all of your questions. Did you have any other comments or concerns that you wanted to talk with us today?
Quick question. You can make this answer shorter as long as you want.
Sure.
But I'm having fun asking other atheists.
Hell yeah.
Do you see any? Well, I think to some degree we can all say that there is some kind of value in religion, but do you think that there is enough value for it to continue into the future? Not per se that will make it illegal, but do you think that it should be, do you think it will continue, or do you think that as time goes on, the value will turn less into like a religious belief and more into like, well, my family, generations ago, we used to be Catholic, so we hang out with Catholics, but it doesn't really matter to me what we are.
I have thoughts on this, but I want Matthew to go first.
Well, like I said before, I'm kind of hoping for a logical deconstruction of religion, but I don't want it to be dismantled by force or any other way. Like I said, I kind of want it to go away how like the Roman religion went away, or the ancient Greeks. I think we can look at it as far as like the Catholic Church, like they were sponsors of art and some literature and that kind of stuff. And I think that's great because they were the people who had the money after the fall of Rome. So I think we can look at it that way. But like I said before, the holy book, the Bible, all the other holy books, all say horrible shit about people. The Christian book basically says to murder gays, and you know, if your wife cheats on you, you know, you can throw her back to her family if she wasn't a virgin already, or take her out to the, you know, kill her if she didn't yell rape loud enough. All kinds of horrible shit, and that needs to go away. It's not even good literature. So that's just my opinion on it.
You know, I think as long as we live in a secular government, and as long as we can uphold those democratic values and keeping that government secular, then our religions will continue to secularize as well. You know, religion and its foundings and its spread has a lot to do with class. And what I mean by that is it has a lot to do with who is the reigning peoples in society, and are they adopting these ideas? I mean, if you even look Christianity as an example, would Christianity be as popular today if Constantine had not have, you know, upholded it as the religion of Rome? I mean, if we had, I mean, probably not, right? Like when we look at the historical trends of how religion spread, and Buddhism is a great example of this too, you know, adopting ruling parties of and you know, the various you know, Eastern beliefs as well, then we see that there's trends in that, and again, it's the ruling parties that are kind of making up how some of these trends are going. And so if we continue to be a secular government in the United States, I would think that our beliefs in at least the United States would also continue to secularize. Now, I say that, but recently it seems like it's kind of the opposite. It seems like there's more and more people who want to kind of bring some of this stuff back. But, you know, we'll see. I think if we look at general trends, I mean, obviously the world is becoming more secular every day. It may be very slow, but religious people, of course, in the world are still very much in the majority. So, you know, who knows what can happen. But I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that people's religious beliefs, again, like we kind of talked about at the beginning of the show, will adopt and change to match the cultures. We'll have more LGBT accepting Christians than non-LGBT accepting Christians, for example. You know, like it's just gonna. I think that's how it's gonna go.
I've got several friends who are younger, like in their early 20s and that kind of stuff, and they are almost all of them are very accepting of gays and trans people and that kind of stuff. They do not care.
Yeah,
they really don't. It's middle-aged guys like myself who are holding on to these beliefs because their dads gave them to them, and so they're just trying to continue. They're the typical conservative as far as not wanting change.
Yep. Or it's just fear. Fear is a part
that
of it.
Too.
Yeah.
There's a bit of that.
Yeah. Well, Andrew, thanks so much for talking to us today. Really appreciate the call.
Thank you, Andrew.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll probably be calling in again, so thank you.
Awesome. Hope to hear from you soon.
Peace.
Yeah. Great call. Great questions as well.
Loved it. It was a great caller.
Yeah. You know, like, it's so interesting to see even how atheists feel differently about how religion's happening right now in the world. you know, like when I was a kid and when I was religious, it seemed like the majority of people I knew were Christian, and so the worldview I saw was just Christian. Everybody in the country was Christian. But like now that I'm so friends with so many fucking atheists, it's like, oh wait, there's way more secular people out there. I just had kind of my Christian lens on, and I made a lot of assumptions about other people's beliefs. I assumed everybody I met was Christian.
You know what's kind of funny is, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I apologize.
Go for it.
When I grew up, I really wondered why other people weren't my religion. And I used to ask my friends from the school bus, hey, come to my church with me, you know, who live close. None of them ever did. And so I seem to remember very few of them going to church now or going to church then. But now it's like we've swapped 180 degrees. I am the not going to church, sleeping in on Sundays. I play Dungeons and Dragons on Sundays, you know, as my church used to call it, devil worship. And so hence the chaotic good shirt. So, you know, it's a Dungeons and Dragons thing. So anyways, and a lot of my friends that I see from high school, they go to church now. They take their kids to church. It's like, I remember you being a slut in high school. What happened?
Oh my gosh. That just reminds me of a story. When I was a kid, I went camping in the Boy Scouts, and there was a dad that went on this huge rant about Harry Potter, because Harry Potter was really big at the time. And it was just like, I loved Harry, at least I loved the movies. I never really read the books. It was just like, you know, that's another example of, oh, that's a different kind of Christianity. Like, what's up, man? Like, it's just the book series and movies. Like,
there's no religion in that at all. And what I find,
it's witchcraft, all right? It's witchcraft, and that is of the devil, Matthew. So,
you know, it's like they're all bastardized Latin, or you know, like, you know, they in one of the movies they said Oberto. Excuse me if I'm probably, or instead of like open, Oberto is Spanish for open. You know, it's like, you know, they're using other like non-English words and trying to say it's the same thing. It's just like, no, it's for kids or for young adults or for like middle-aged guys like myself who want a little bit of escapism, you know, a little bit of fantasy, you know. It's a nice little world to get in, and I think that she should be congratulated for creating a world that's wholesome, that really doesn't have a whole lot to do with religion, but still talks about good versus evil.
Yeah, okay, but realistically though, and I just want to point out here, folks, I am stalling just a little bit because we have open lines. We don't have anybody else in the call queue right now. I'm surprised. This has not happened in a really long time. So, guys, please come in and call it and talk to us. We have open lines here. We definitely want to get to anybody who wants to come bring in. So, yeah, like, how many people do you think actually got into magic after reading Harry Potter? Because I would bet it's in the thousands. I would bet.
What kind of magic? What do you mean by
it's in the
magic?
Tens of thousands, right? It has to be.
What do you mean? What do you mean by magic?
Like, I'm talking about people who, you know, who either post pictures of their spells or recipes on Tumblr, or maybe they're
that kind of crap.
Yeah, you know, like that kind of stuff. You know, like people who say that they're witches and all that stuff. I knew a girl who said she was a Christian witch, and that was kind of interesting. I didn't know what that meant.
It's funny because the Bible says that witches need to be put to death.
That's what I said. I was like, what is that? I don't know. Because you can just make stuff up at that point, I guess. If you're going to be casting spells, you might as well just make everything up because...
Well, it's funny because, like, even that... because I did see some articles in magazines and that kind of... and online that said that, you know, that witchcraft and Wiccan is gaining some popularity after the movies and that kind of stuff. But like any other religion, it ebbs and flows. But they're just doing what we did as Christians and saying, yeah, I felt something must have happened, but nothing did. So
where are my witches at? Witches, call into the show. Witches and warlocks. That's what we need on this program.
I touched on that briefly when I was stationed out in San Diego.
Oh, yeah?
I mean, yeah, I had a girlfriend who was a quasi into that a little bit. And, you know, when you're trying to get laid, you know what I'm saying? You know, you're going to, you know.
Did you cast a spell? Is that
no, I did not. But, you know, I tried to cast a line and I got rejected. But anyway, so, but yeah, so, you know, I read a couple of books on some stuff and, you know, I was still kind of breaking away from my Christianity then at that point. This was the late 1990s,
Okay.
like 95, 96. So I was starting to get the feelers out for, is this crap? And I was reading some of this stuff. I'm like, this doesn't seem any different to me than Christianity. It's just a different set of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so weird to me because so a big reason why I'm was a Christian, I should say, I am not a Christian anymore, was because I grew up around Christians. Like that was just part of my culture. And people usually don't grow up around witches, right? That's kind of its own thing. So I'm wondering how much of the personal identity kind of goes into that. If and this isn't to shit on people or anything like that, but if this is a belief people adopt because they want to be different from people, or maybe this is something that they figure out. Maybe they know some friends and their friends kind of get into it. It's a multi-level marketing thing. I don't know. I generally just don't know how you can find something convincing, because unless you show me a spell or unless you can show me something that's working, I wouldn't become a witch. I wouldn't have a reason to, or a warlock or whatever, it goes for those. So
there was that movie that came out, and I think it was 92. It was like three teenage girls who were casting spells on each other. And anyways, so there was a fight in it. I just remember the girls being really hot.
That's Keeping Up with the Kardashians, I think. Is that
everything I've learned about the Kardashians, I've learned against my will. So
okay. That was a bad joke, but a joke.
It was
nonetheless.
No, but there was a joke. There was a movie in 1992. It was about a witch who moves to Southern California, and she meets a couple of other ones, and they cast some spells and stuff. The Craft, thank you.
The Craft. That was Silas, who's our stand-in producer tonight, whispering into Matt's ear. Yes, The Craft. Never seen that movie. I think I've seen the poster. I don't know if I've ever seen it, though. When I think of witches and stuff, I think of the Disney Channel, Halloween Town kind of stuff.